Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healer specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory and welcome to episode 289 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We're thrilled to have not just one but two exceptional guests joining us. So let's extend a warm welcome to Ellie, Finch and Lesley, Simpson-Gray. Ellie Finch has a postgraduate diploma in integrative counselling and psychotherapy, a master's degree in social work, wide-ranging experience including school counselling, working at a women's centre providing young persons counselling service, and she's currently working with Relate as a couple and family counsellor, as well as running a busy private practice with children, young people, parents and families, both in the room and online. Lesley Simpson-Gray practices exclusively online or by telephone. She has a master's degree in child psychotherapy, postgraduate diploma in integrative arts psychotherapy. She's a certified cybertherapist using technology and creative interventions to engage children online. That includes incorporating the use of avatars through video games and online platforms, and has a particular interest and experience working with children on the autistic spectrum. Both my guests are members of the Association of Counselling and Therapy Online, ACTO, and have joined us today to talk about a fabulous lecture they've delivered for the Counsellor CPD Library, an introduction to using digital tools online. So if you're interested in the online world or you are an online therapist, this really isn't to be missed interview, and indeed the lecture itself isn't to be missed either. And as always, I'm joined by Ken. Ken, how are you doing today?
I'm exceptionally well, thanks for asking, Rory. Rory and I hope that you are well. As Rory's already introduced, we have an incredible episode for you today, with those 3 stops on the journey, starting off with ethical, sustainable practice, where today we're going to be diving into the 5 reasons to become a clinical supervisor. If you're thinking of becoming a supervisor, it's going to be a good fit for you. If you're already a supervisor, have a look at them and see, is that something that you're experiencing? Then into practice matters, into that amazing interview that Rory has already introduced for you. And then we're going to end today's episode with student services, where we recognize you students on your journey. And today we're going to be speaking about theory, the theories of counselling, but more specifically, the differences. What's the difference? What's the same? We're going to be comparing and contrasting some of the main counselling theories and showing you how you can kind of use that formula when writing an assignment or thinking about how your modality differs from a different modality. But let's kick off into ethical, sustainable practice. And this is the part of the podcast where we recognize that for sustainability, in order for us to operate as practitioners and be able to sustain a practice, in other words, make a living from it, we sometimes need to look in other areas. And one area of great sustainability is supervision. And the reason for that is every counsellor will need to see a supervisor. So it instantly opens a whole new market when one has done that kind of training. It's no secret that we offer clinical supervision training for counsellors here at Counselling Tutor, including the specialist module for also delivering supervision online and by telephone. But today we want to look at 5 reasons to become a clinical supervisor, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about this before we turned on the microphone today. And, the wisdom of being a counsellor is gained by our wisdom as counsellors is gained by the hard yards that we do as practitioners, both in when we're doing our student practice and then when we go on to clinical practice. And we gain a whole lot of knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is one thing, information, but the wisdom is how it's applied. I think you get to a point where you have so much, it's useful to think about becoming a supervisor and sharing that information with other therapists. That part of being a supervisor is to enhance the profession, and I think it also expands your skill set. You develop new skills as a supervisor. A lot of people who undertake supervision training, including myself, developed a more maybe a more direct approach, being able to say to supervisees, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? A bit more of an active directive approach. And also I think that you can mentor new therapists. Certainly I've mentored students and helped them develop their practice, as I've mentored supervisees who have just moved from being students into either private practice or working for an agency, and got them through that kind of difficult hinterland of what you do at college and what you do in the real world. And I think a good supervisor could do that, help them develop real world skills within the work. And I also think that there's more administration when you're in private practice, be it tax, be it having to fill reports in, be it having to write notes in different systems. So I think that's one really good reason to become a supervisor. You enhance your professional growth and development. You develop your professional formation as a practitioner. And also, of course, you spend a lot of time researching. You can research, supervisees come to you, ask you about something, you go off and research it. So you're actually developing your own skill set as a therapist as well.
Yeah, there's a richness to professional growth and development. It's a very, very rewarding activity, and I'm sure you've experienced that if you're not a supervisor, just in your counselling training, the richness that comes from delving a little bit deeper into maybe the psychology of the human condition, as we call it, understanding things, seeing it in yourself, seeing it in others. And number one of the 5 reasons to become a clinical supervisor is that enhancement of the professional growth and development within yourself. And I guess that is always in service of others, as we always say. It's in service of the supervisees who are therefore in contact with clients, and it makes that big difference. I'm going to go through what the 5 reasons are so you kind of know what to expect as we're going through. Rory's covered the first, enhance professional growth and development. The second one is contribute to the counselling profession. We'll come back to that one in a moment. The third one is your personal satisfaction, your own fulfillment in what it is that you do in a day-to-day basis. Then there is a diversification and income streams. We don't go into counselling maybe for pure income-based reasons, but at the end of the day, we need to be ethical and sustainable in our practice. That's number 4. And then the 5th topic we're going to cover today under this is networking and collaboration opportunities. It really does open up networks. So let's go to number 2, contribute to the counselling profession. So get a very unique seat as a clinical supervisor where you have influence to shape future therapists and play that really pivotal role in molding a competent, ethical, and skilled new therapist. If your training is robust, you are there sharing and being there and guiding not just new therapists, even an established therapist. And we don't need to look too far back in the past, Rory, to recognize when so many people went from face-to-face in the room counselling to being forced to moving online because they weren't able to see their clients. And one of the things I noticed were the discussions in the Counselling Tutor Facebook group were around, I went to my supervisor to explore. So it's where we go at that time, and promoting quality of care, I think, also falls under that, contributing to the counselling profession. We get to be part of ensuring a higher standard of care in the profession by imparting knowledge and experience to those upcoming practitioners or seasoned practitioners if we're finding new and interesting information. Rory, on to personal satisfaction and fulfillment, which is point number 3. What can we consider there?
Well, I think they've been a supervisor, for me anyway, over the last 8 or 9 years. It's quite a rewarding experience, helping build the profession and the new wave of therapists that are coming in and helping them develop them. It's wonderful witnessing the growth. I have some wonderful supervisees, some of whom will certainly be listening to this podcast, and developing their professional development and their personal development when working with clients, and seeing them grow. And some of them then develop and go on to be supervisees themselves. I've supervised a lot of people who said, "Do you think I should become a supervisor?" And I've said, "I think you should. Yeah, I think you should. You've got a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, and you've got a lot of skills that will allow you to really enhance someone's practice." So it's a virtuous circle, really. And also, I think there's something about leaving something behind for the profession. Our profession is a profession of, generally speaking, good-hearted people who sit with other people to help them through their difficulties. And I think, building a legacy of that, I still take away a lot from my first supervisor that I had when I was a student. You're never far away from me in my practice, and of course my current supervisor. So I think it is a rewarding experience. I think it's very satisfying. I enjoy being a supervisor, Ken.
Well, that personal satisfaction and fulfillment, point number 3 in our 5 points, I think is so important. And again, it's the word there that stands out is that fulfillment. I'm going to share some very carefully selected sentences, and these sentences are from trainees that are now supervisors that undertook the Counselling Tutor clinical supervision training. And I think the reason I picked these is because I think it really points to what we're speaking about now, of that fulfillment. This training has enhanced my counselling practice, as well as giving me the tools and confidence to move on as a supervisor. And that's interesting. Not just I've learned now how to become a supervisor, actually enhanced my own counselling practice. There's a lot of fulfillment in that. The next one, greatly enhanced my practice and knowledge. It's interesting, not related to supervision again, just related to all-round practice. Helped me grow and thrive in the therapeutic space and beyond. There's the growth again, thriving. It's that confidence and competence that comes not just as being a supervisor, but in your own practice, because it may have been some years since you last kind of looked at your own practice in any level of detail. And of course, on when you train to become a supervisor, you're encouraged to look back at your practice because you're going to be there in service of others. And finally, the sentence I pulled is, I've learned more on this course about how to be a counsellor than I did from my formal training. And that again, I'm leaving out any mentions of supervisor or supervision here. There is a fulfillment that raises the level of satisfaction, not just because you're now a supervisor, but within your own practice as well. So that is personal satisfaction and fulfillment. We now move on to point number 4. And I think this is an important one. You're able to diversify and create an income stream. So there are financial benefits to that, because supervision can provide an additional revenue stream to your existing practice, and diversifying that income can increase financial stability. And again, perhaps we didn't come into this for a money-making reason. So many of us, we do this because we want to make a difference. And I know from myself, I would gladly give it away free, Rory, if I could. I mean, this podcast is free. Why? Because we have a want to give out the information and share what we know, give it away. But the reality is we need to make a living from it. And by diversifying, by adding another niche, I think that's the word for it. A niche is where you're able to work to a different client group. And in this instance, that different client group is actually counselors. So they become supervisees. It increases what you're able to offer. And I know from speaking to some of our peers that are already supervisors and some that have just qualified as supervisors, the difference in what their bookings look like, what their diary looks like, is quite significant. There's a leveling up in terms of numbers of people that they're able to see because they have, I guess, a new product. That's what it really is. You're able to offer a new product. And of course, it offers flexible scheduling as well there. So often supervision can be scheduled more flexibly than a client session, allowing for better work-life balance because you're working with a fellow professional. You can work it out together. And one other thing that I wanted to add in here is when we work with a client, we're trying to put ourselves out of business. Now, I say that almost tongue-in-cheek, and what I mean by that is there is no bigger celebration for us as a counsellor when we're working with a client, when that client reaches a point where they can move on and leave us. So we're working hard to kind of to get our clients to a point where they go away. And that may be 6 sessions, it doesn't matter however many sessions it is. However, with supervisees, they are likely, if they're getting what they need from supervision, to stick around a lot longer. And of course, my first supervisor, when I went into placement and my first steps in practice, I was with my first supervisor for more than 3 years before I needed to move on and look for a change and some more challenge within my supervision. So there's a longevity, which of course allows you to kind of budget and know what your income is going to be without having to rely on brand new clients coming in all the time. So that is number 4, diversity, income streams, Rory. And I'm going to hand you number 5, which I love, and that's networking and collaboration.
Yes, and before we leave the diversifying income streams, there's another self-care benefit to becoming a supervisor, and that is that you're, as a supervisor, you're not offering therapy. I mean, surely you'll offer support with as a supervisor to supervisees who may be struggling professionally, but it means that you don't have to fill your diary up with clients to make a living. And because working with clients can, impact your own emotional health. If you've got 25 clients a week, and some of those are trauma-related clients, it will impact on you. It will impact on your health. Vicarious trauma is a real thing. So it allows you to have a mix of work. So you can see clients, and you could offer client work, which will supplement your income, but also you could have supervisees as well, which are, I'm going to be really honest about this, a lot less demanding. It's a lot less emotionally demanding working as a supervisor than it is a counsellor. And Ken has spoken to the fact that that there's a longer term engagement, so you can plan your financial health a bit better. And we all need, tea bags aren't going any cheaper, I noticed, in the supermarket. So you really do need to think about your own financial well-being. But to go on to number 5.5, networking and collaboration. I don't want to be kind of too hierarchical with this, but you do get seen slightly through a different lens when you're a supervisor, because professionals, certainly if you're being asked to work in organisations or give advice or mentorship in organisations, those organisations will look for a supervisory qualification, and that means that you get new connections and new opportunities. Certainly, I've been asked specifically to speak about issues of supervision within organisations, and I think one of the greatest benefits, it's a two-way street. Because you're not just on transmit mode when you're a supervisor, you're on receive, which means that when a supervisee comes to you, you might think, oh, I've never thought of that. They may be working with an area that you're you have no knowledge of, in which case you go away and research it and find out about it. And then what happens is you've learned from your supervisee, and then you can pass that learning on to the next supervisee who brings the same issue. So there's a huge amount of networking, learning and collaboration opportunities. And certainly if you're going for any form of a job where you're overseeing therapists, they'll want the supervision qualification. It's as simple as that. It's seen as a gold standard if you're working in an organisation where you're producing any policies or procedures, or you're involved in training, training of therapists. Supervisory qualification is, as they say, CV gold, Ken.
It is indeed. I love how you've kind of structured that, and speaking about that, expanding your professional network. If you think about your formal core training to become a counsellor or a psychotherapist, there's an even grounding in that everyone's on the same level. They'll generally come in, if you're at the lower levels, maybe a level 2 or just an introduction course, nobody really knows much about counselling at all. So if you look around your peers, they also don't know much about, and you learn together and you learn the same kind of information throughout that core training and development part of the journey. But as soon as you've been qualified for some years and you've got an air of maturity around your practice, and you're taking on these additional trainings, as it were, you're spending your time with other practitioners that are also mature in their practice. You might be rubbing shoulders with somebody that's been a counsellor for 15 years and has now decided, you know what, it's time for me to train as a supervisor. So you get a richness of experience coming together. You also get a diversity in the modalities. So clinical supervision is not necessarily modality specific. So you would understand the modality of the supervisee that you are working with, but you're going to be working to a supervision framework, not a modality framework. And of course, you need to understand the modality. But what that means is when you're training to become a clinical supervisor, you are rubbing shoulders with mature practitioners, perhaps from other modalities, and you're seeing how that kind of integrates and comes together. And of course, when we rub shoulders together, we spend time together, we develop those professional networks and those friendships, we learn, and you have a group of people that you can go to when you have questions, when you have thoughts, when you have considerations, and they can share how it is for you. I'm a member of a couple of groups, and within those groups, I'm amazed on a daily basis of what kind of information is just shared in discussions, and I learn all the time. There is a handout for this. 5 reasons to become a clinical supervisor, and you can get that by going to counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab, go to episode 289, go and download it. If you're thinking of becoming a clinical supervisor, go and have a look at what some of those benefits are of becoming a clinical supervisor, and that gives you the opportunity to decide whether you are ready for that. And of course, there are many amazing supervision training courses out. If you're interested in ours, you just go to counsellingtutor.com. All of that information is on that home page. You don't have to go further. Just scroll down until you see our clinical supervision training course, and you can go and have a look, get more information on that, and join a waiting list if you like to get updates on our next openings. So that is ethical, sustainable practice for today. And as we're back out of that, we're going to Practice Matters, where Rory, you held an interview with Ellie Finch and Lesley Simpson-Gray, and it was speaking about digital tools in this online world now. And I think I know that there's a massive demand. I know that this is a great area of CPD, and I know that a full lecture was actually done on this that we've included in our professional development library, our continuing professional development library for counsellors and psychotherapists, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that online therapy has become part of the mix now of therapy. It's moved from a developing area, maybe a specialist area before the pandemic, now to be part of the general offer of therapy that therapists offer, and also that clients demand. And as part of that, sometimes using different tools within online therapy, such as sand trays or other useful tools that you would use in a therapy room, are now available to use online. So I caught up with Lesley and Ellie and spoke about those tools, and this is what they had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
Online therapy has come of age, certainly since the 2019 pandemic, and with that is the need for tools that can be used in an online environment. A lot of therapists use things like sand trays, which of course are unavailable if you're working across an online platform. So it's my great pleasure to speak today with Ellie Finch and Lesley Simpson-Gray, talking about introduction to the use of digital tools in online counselling. And this is a lecture they produced for our Counsellor CPD Library. So first of all, Ellie and Lesley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yes, it's lovely to be here.
So I think the first question is, Lesley, how did the development of using online tools start within online therapy? Was it something that was gradual, or was it something that was immediate, that people realised there was an immediate need once they went online?
No, I think actually online therapy has been around for a long time. And I thought to myself, as you asked me that, I've got no idea the actual date that sort of marks history, but it has been around for a long time. Certainly before the pandemic made so many of us have to go online. I think that was a real turning point for many people to sort of think, well, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to sort of save my business or save my clients and give this a go. And it was shocking and scary. So I think that was a real turning point, but it had been around for a long time before that. I think just lots of people have been using different methods of emails and so many different ways of being online that haven't been classed as online therapy. So it's kind of evolved over lots of different centuries. In fact, I think Freud sort of wrote letters to various sort of colleagues, clients and such, all way back then. So yeah, it's been around for a while.
Yes. I mean, I think that's an interesting point, isn't it, Lesley? That we forget that remote therapy has been around for a long time. If my A level in psychology reminds me, I think it was Little Hans, wasn't it, that Freud wrote to, because he was frightened of horses, and that would have been classed as asynchronous therapy, I guess, wouldn't it? You write a letter, you send it, you wait it comes back. And of course, one of the things we learn in online therapy training is that, the famous Freud and Jung correspondence where they famously fell out was to do, I guess, with a form of disinhibition. And, they fell out eventually, famously fell out, for those who are students of the Freud-Jung era. So it's been around for a long time. It's been in use for a long time. So, Ellie, what kind of tools are therapists using? What kind of tools do therapists want to access?
Well, it's really exciting because there are so many, actually, and we do go into, we give you little snippets, little tastes of a variety that kind of, in terms of, I like to think of it as we talk a lot about working in your comfort zone, and in your kind of extending your comfort zone a little bit by trying out new digital tools. But we share a range from, so digital sand trays, for example. We talk a lot about digital sand trays in this, and 2D ones where you can just access them on a web browser, and they're really simple and straightforward for you and your client to use. And so that sort of tool you can get started with straight away and just kind of experiment with. And you might, if you really love a digital sound tray, like me and Lesley do, you might find you want to go into 3D and a bit more immersive sound trays where you can kind of sort of be in that sound tray with your client a little bit and have a bit more of a 3D immersive experience with them that can add a little extra something. But and then just going from there, I love a video game. I love using video games like Minecraft, and we explore that a little bit in the lecture. And Lesley goes into virtual reality and AI, and just the kind of, it's sort of limitless what's happening, and it can be a bit overwhelming. And so we really wanted to make sure that people realize that they can just start with this quite a simple, straightforward web browser, free, easily accessible 2D sound tray, and sort of take it from there and see what your comfort level is at that point, and then maybe extend that a little bit within your competence.
Yeah. So
I think the thing about comfort zone, sorry, Rory, that is so important. I remember when I first qualified as a psychotherapist and thinking, I've done all my training, and what do I use in my room now? I'm free to use whatever I want, and tools and toys and you name it. And obviously we've been doing sort of placements along the way, so you weren't completely unfamiliar with it, but just thinking I can use whatever I want in my playroom now. And looking back, you had to sort of start with what you were comfortable putting in there. You had the basics, and it's no different with online stuff. You've got sort of some very basic things that can work, but it's very much following sort of what you're interested in and what you're curious about and what you want to bring into your therapy practice or counselling practice. And it's no different from that process. It's just that you're using online digital tools instead. So it doesn't always have to be complicated.
Yeah, exactly. So in sort of traditional room-based counselling, you might be the kind of counsellor that has lots of art materials around, or a sound tray, and it's the same really. It's like you might gravitate towards particular tools, digital tools that have similarities to those, and you might be thinking of your clients a bit and think, oh, what would actually they like? And that's how video game therapy started for me, in terms of seeing that my clients really love video games, the young people that I work with, and it really spurred me on to develop my practice in that way and learn as much as I could about using video games.
I think this whole world is fascinating. I recently spoke with Daniel Hand, who's a very very well known gaming practitioner, who's carving new ground, and that interview's in our podcast library somewhere. And what fascinates me is the immersive world of online. So I'm Lesley, you say start off simply an online sound tray, but you also alluded to kind of 3D immersive. Am I thinking virtual reality goggles and all that type of thing?
All of that. Absolutely. But in saying that, I go from a very simple principle as well, and go right back to things that were involved in my training about you just want to take your client into an immersive space. And we do that just all the time in face-to-face work and in a sort of actual room. We take our clients to a place where they also use their imagination, where they can step out of the real world and just be in a space that feels safe and supportive. And we take them on a journey, and we're doing exactly the same thing online. It's no different. So stepping into an immersive space in VR, or stepping into a space where you can imagine like being alongside an avatar or a 3D image or a model of something. We're just using the technology to do exactly what we've been trained to do. And all of those principles, it's exactly the same. We're just going into an immersive space. But you've got to be really sort of careful, I suppose, of doing that online and using the technology to make sure that is a safe space, because it can feel very overwhelming. It can feel just a bit too much. And so having those boundaries there that we make sure that it is safe, it does feel safe, it's not sort of overexposing, and all those issues around disinhibition and sort of being sort of too much at once all come into play. But yeah, sort of being in that space, it's very, very exciting. I remember someone saying to me, "Oh, how come I can't be in your virtual room with you?" And I was so frustrated because at the time I was using sort of PowerPoints and just asking clients to imagine being in that space with me from a slide. And I was so frustrated because thinking, I don't know how to do that. And then, just so over the course of time, thinking, actually, the technology does allow us to do that. And it does allow us to be in those spaces together. It's really exciting. So, yes, that's what keeps me awake at night.
It sounds terribly exciting. And I guess one of the things that as a therapist, a kind of guiding light for therapists is meeting the clients where they're at. And that includes what they want. So I'd ask you, Ellie, is this use of technology in the therapy room now an emerging area with certain client groups?
Definitely from my own practice experience, I have a very strong focus on using video games, and I would say that as soon as I opened up my practice and said that I was using video games within it, I had a lot of interest from parents of who had neurodivergent children who could just instantly see that would engage their child in counselling when they were, potentially socially anxious, not going out. It was COVID, not going to school, and actually not open to going to counselling. But the idea of having something like video games or a cool digital sound tray can really appeal to a young person. And Minecraft is particularly popular with neurodivergent people. It's got some real great elements to it that seems to really draw neurodivergent people to them, including myself. I think it's about, yes, like you said, creating spaces that are accessible and engaging to our clients, and not expecting them to come to us in where we are necessarily. We need to kind of come to them with the tools and the competency and the confidence to use these tools, so that they can engage with something that draws them, that is interesting to them.
Yeah, I think this really speaks to meeting the clients where they are. I had to smile to myself the other day. I found a toolbox, these little plastic toolboxes that you have your household tools in, and it says Rory's box, do not remove. And I thought, I remember that. It has tools in it now. But it used to have my little counselling kit in when I was a school counsellor, and it had things like pens and elastic bands, and I had Monster top trumps cards, and it seems to be the world's moved on a bit now.
It's really interesting what you say, Rory. That sense of your toolkit, you identify with that, what's in there, and you've got the memories of using those tools, and it takes you back to a certain place. And I think, again, it's the tools that we use online are just as important, that we can see and identify ourselves and why we made them, why our clients have selected them. It's great just having this real sort of buzz about the excitement of I could do this, or I could do that, do the other, wow. And for that to feel overwhelming, and for people to forget sometimes that sometimes the most simplest tools can be really effective as well. There's a real sort of tendency sometimes to have this fear of missing out, to say we've got to have the most shiny, or we've got to have the most amazing, and got to be high tech. Sometimes those little sort of simple toolkits, those things that are really familiar, like your toolbox, that sort of says, it works, I know what's in there, I know how it works, can be, they're just they're your tools, and tools are very much about the people who use them. That's so important for people to sort of think about as well, that it doesn't all need to be high tech. It can be very simple, very focused, and just what's right for your practice as well.
I think it's when you are using one of these digital tools and you realise that you are just using it in the way that you would use any of those other traditional tools that you might be more familiar with from your training and from early experience in your career, and you're going, I'm just it's just like when I watch a child use a video game. Oh, it's just like watching them make a sand tray or do a drawing. It's the same skills I'm using when I do that. It's the same therapeutic skills that I'm using. And I think when you sort of realize that, you go, oh, actually, this is okay. I can do this.
Yes, and I guess that brings me to the question of, it's great us training ourselves up. Your lecture will be talking about, the tools that are available, but also I guess we have to realise, are our clients capable of using these tools? How do we introduce that and assess whether they've got the technology at home to use it, and how does that work? Is that a conversation that you have with the client and say, we can use this, but how do you feel about that?
I use quite a long, laborious process of contracting, and that's the one thing about working online.
Yeah,
there are so many more T's crossed and dots over the I's, and just things because they're not tangible things, we have to make them tangible by being very specific. So across the board, that's the one thing about working online. So having conversations with clients, say, actually, this is available for young people aged 13 plus. I'm not going to go outside of what you're allowed to do technically on social media, although we know that lots of young people, they don't adhere to that. But I'm going to, within my practice, and say this is for this age group only. So, for example, I don't take anyone under the age of 13 into VR. They may use it themselves at home, that's fine. But in my practice, this is how it is. So stating that really clearly. And then also saying to youngsters, don't buy anything that's specific for therapy. We're going to use what you've got already. So no, it's not an excuse to say, I have to buy a new Oculus because Lesley says so because we're using it in our therapy. No. It's having that sort of balance really as well. I don't know, Ellie, do you do something similar?
Yeah, I do. I work with children and young people and families that, I work with them online, and I use things like video games, and, they're not made for mental health practitioners to use. So I have to do a lot of contracting and a lot of getting informed consent. So that means me understanding what the data protection issues and security issues might be with those digital tools, and then sharing that in an accessible way with my clients, and ensuring that they're giving me their informed consent and they understand things like, when a server might be storing their data in another country, that means that their data is kept in a different way, and they have to a different legislation that's not maybe the same as we have in the UK, and the implications of that, and all sorts of things around usernames we use and keeping data safe. And I think that is, yes, like Lesley, I have quite a full-on counselling agreement. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's an interesting point, isn't it? We Counselling Tutor run an online and telephone course, and one of the biggest bits of feedback we get from those people who do it say the contracting is very, very comprehensive, far more comprehensive than sat in a room, and our response has always been, well, yes, because you're using the decisions you have to make about how you work online are more and varied than when you work in the room. And, in terms of using third-party technology such as video feeds or games or AI, artificial intelligence, there are things clients need to know. They need to know about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other end of the extreme is us as practitioners knowing more about the games and tools that come into our space. I know, Ellie, you bring a whole wealth of experience, information about Minecraft and about just helping parents to sort of sort their way through different versions and different formats, and what it should do, what it shouldn't do in therapy, and how to all the settings. And it's massive, but I think that's the area that's evolving. I'd love to see far more practitioners just being aware. Well, how is that game set up? What sort of environment am I taking my client into creatively? And kids these days they're all up into coding and you name it.
Yeah.
They're creating their own games. They're not even relying on the games that we can bring in. How can we support them to do that? How can we be sort of far more creative with the tools. So I think there's vast amounts out there. It's very exciting, but real scope to know, to be far more aware of what we're taking our clients into. And how to do that safely, how to do that well, to do no harm.
And I think as newer generations of counsellors are trained and going through training, it's going to be expected from them that they'll have this training in digital tools, it needs to be there embedded in the trainings, so that people are going into this with confidence and an open mind to it, but also knowing how to keep their clients safe in these spaces. And I think at the moment you've got kind of a mixture of some counsellors are completely kind of held back by the fear of doing it wrong, which is such a shame. And then also some are kind of leaping ahead without potentially thinking about the data protection and the security stuff. And so it's sort of helping people to find a balance between those two kinds of ways of being around digital tools that we're kind of aiming to do with this lecture.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my final question, really. What do you hope that people will take away from this wonderful lecture you've produced?
What do you reckon, Ellie?
Well, I'd love people to feel inspired and confident enough to kind of grab one of these tools and just start using it with themselves, and then using it with friends and getting confidence with it, and seeing what it might be like to do it online, and then sort of making your list of things that you need to make sure you're going through with clients around those digital tools, and just seeing the beauty of how it can open up your practice, really, to express to allowing your clients to express themselves in creative ways. That goes beyond just using a video platform, two little boxes talking to each other.
No, I agree. I think that whole invitation to play, we miss out on the simplicity and the fun and the challenge sometimes of playing something new, playing a new game, doing something different, but that's what our clients have to do. And so we've got the challenge now to say, come and play with me, come and try this tool out. Just like, are you interested in this, or what do you want to do? And let's see what it does. And it really is, it's like an open invitation. And hopefully people will see from our lecture just lots of different ways to do that.
Yeah.
Starts with your interest, find something that interests you, that says, oh, yeah, I could do that. I could give that a go. I could find someone to play with. So yeah, do it. Yeah. Comes out nice and simple.
I have to say that your enthusiasm for this modality or this way of working is contagious. You're so passionate, so excited about it. I want to rush off now and buy myself a set of Oculus Rift 3D glasses and plug myself into the metaverse and get going. I'm hoping that those listening will understand that the world of counselling is changing. We have to meet clients where they are, and there are some specific groups that might be better met. The neurodivergent, I'm thinking more the neurodivergent community, may be better met in areas where they feel safe and secure and it's familiar for them.
Yeah.
Introduction to using digital tools in online counselling is now available in our CPD library. So it just goes for me to say, Ellie Finch and Lesley Simpson-Gray, thank you so much for joining us.
Big thank you to Ellie Finch and to Lesley Simpson-Gray and to you, Rory, for holding that interview and bringing us the good stuff. If you'd like to hear more about using digital tools online, there is a full lecture, and that is available in the Counselling Tutor CPD library. Just go to counsellingtutor.com. All the information is on that page to join up if you're not a member. If you are a member, log in, go and enjoy the lecture. It's really good stuff. And that kind of moves us on to our student services. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real-life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit CounsellingSkillsAcademy.com to learn more and to claim your Counselling Tutor discount. That's CounsellingSkillsAcademy.com. And in student services today, we're going to be looking at counselling theories and specifically looking at what are the similarities, what are the differences in counselling theories. And if we are ever asked to think about or write about those differences, how might we compare and contrast and understand the differences? And this is, I think, a really important topic, Rory. You know, we are called upon by our ethical frameworks to work within our competences. And by understanding different modalities that are maybe not our own, different theories that we might not be working with, we're able to see what our modality or theory might be a good fit for, but also understand what it might not be a good fit for. And if we do recognize maybe an area that it falls outside of our competence range, or where our theory might not be the best application for that client, we're then able to refer intelligently rather than just say, oh, you know what, that's not really what I work with. You'd need to find another counsellor, and leaving that to the client, you may be able to say what you might be looking for. In your case, is maybe a XYZ type counsellor, because you understand that comparison and that contrasting of what works and why.
Yes, and you're absolutely right, Ken. Part of the reason that we compare and contrast theories as students is first of all, so we know the difference between the theories. So, you know, if you're working as a person-centered therapist, someone comes to you and says they have a fear of, I don't know, bees. Should we say a fear of bees? It might be that working with a cognitive behavioural therapist may be very, very useful, because if they're coming for one specific thing, and this has happened to me in my practice, people have, you know, I've spoken to people and they said, well, I've got a fear of, say, flying or bees, or it could be a fear of anything. It might be worth using a behavioural technique rather than a phenomenological technique. In other words, looking at the fear, addressing the fear, and desensitising someone from the fear. So that, if it's just that, could be worth moving someone to a different therapist. And I also think, you know, one of the reasons this is done at, I think, level 3 or certificate for our friends in Scotland, is that it gives students an opportunity to see the different theories and think, I wonder if I'd like to train in a different theory. You know, so I've had therapists who've come to me, and they've you know, students who've come to me and they've said, oh, I love person-centered, but I want to be a TA therapist. And I've said, great. You've learnt about transactional analysis in the comparison. You know, it's a psychoanalytical therapy. Why don't you train as a TA therapist? Because that might be your interest. And some have said, I want to be a CBT therapist. Well, why not be a CBT therapist? So I think that the reason we compare and contrast is, as Ken has said, so we know what the client needs. It's always the best fit for the client. We don't overstep our remit. We don't sort of move into a modality we're not trained in or know too much about. And also, it gives a choice, a pathway for students to think, do you know, I think I'm going to stick with the person-centered model. I quite like that. Or I'll train in person-centered and then I'll go on and train in a different modality. So quite a few reasons when compare and contrast that can kind of inform students and indeed practitioners, I think, Ken.
Yeah, very, very much so. And it's it informs training pathways, as you've already said. It will inform CPD post-training, if you're able to compare and contrast. So an example of that may be that if you understand trauma and the theories around trauma and how that presents, and compare it to your base model, you may see that there is a deficit. And it's always, we're looking in service of the clients that we see. And if we see a deficit, it means that we can't go there, because the client can only go as far as the counsellor can go. So as soon as we reach an area where we don't know where the road is anymore, we can't be there with the client because we don't know what is there. So we act from a place of incompetence within that area. So it can inform where we might need to do some training, and it can inform the training that we might enjoy most. So you mentioned maybe somebody doing a person-centered training course and then comparing a TA model and going, I like that. I love those theories. That is really interesting to me. So it can inform where your interests might lead you as you develop and grow your practice. So that's the reason from comparing and contrasting theories. But how is it done? So it's done like this. If you are comparing and contrasting two theories, you're really looking at what is the difference or the similarities between those two theories or those two modalities, and what is the same. What is the differences, and what is the same, Rory? And I know that you, when you were teaching this, you would use two circles. It's called a Venn diagram that intersect. So you've got two separate circles, but part of the separate circles intersect. And on the left-hand side of the first circle, you might put modality 1 or theory 1. On the right circle would be theory 2, and you'd put what is different outside of the segment that intersects on both sides, and that is similar or a crossover in the middle. And then you can see what is clearly different and where the overlap is between the two theories or the two modalities, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it was three theories, I'd use three circles that overlapped and do it that way. And also, one of the things that you have to put in, if you're doing this, if you're comparing and contrasting and you're listening to this, is what are the curative factors? So what makes the client better? What helps the client in terms of the theory? So if it's person-centered theory, it's based in self-actualization and finding their real selves and being able to have an authentic voice for themselves. And I guess moving away from other people's views and just being yourself. You've got to be yourself. You can't be no one else, to paraphrase Noel Gallagher. If you're looking at psychoanalytical, then you'd be looking at childhood experience, how childhood experience has influenced the way that we behave as adults. And you might look for things like scripts, life scripts, and which ego state you're in, and also the fact that could be a longer piece of work. And if you're doing behavioural therapy, CBT or REBT, the curative factor is helping clients challenge irrational beliefs. That's the baseline of it. If someone says, I don't think someone's likes me, then a CBT therapist says, what's your evidence for that? And it's a more evidence-based where you're asking people to look at the evidence. And those are the things you need in your assignment, because your tutor is looking that you know what the curative factors are. I use the word cure kind of loosely, but what helps the client move along? Is it understanding themselves a bit better and being a bit more robust in the world? Is it challenging irrational beliefs? Or is it understanding how childhood experiences can influence how we behave today as adults? And those are the things that gets the marks in assignments.
Yeah. And what you've spoken about there are parts of those modalities that are very different from one another. So they would sit outside of the segment that intersects, if we were picturing the Venn diagram in our mind. And one of the reasons that we kind of get that picture in our mind is because it can be very confusing for the client if we're jumping between different theories, trying to find a fit for them. So one week we're saying challenging irrational beliefs and giving homework and exercises for them to do, which would live happily in behavioral or CBT. Then the next week we're delving about how they feel about that and their own personal reflections, and we are being non-directive as the client kind of leads us, would sit in person-centered therapy. And the week after that we think, maybe I should go back to look if what happened in childhood, and we might now be doing it in a child work, and we're now set to the more psychodynamic theories. That can be really confusing for a client. They're pulled from side to side. So understanding those is really important. And I think let's just end this, Rory, by let's do a compare and contrast of let's do TA, transactional analysis, and person-centered. And I'll start off. So I'm going to put TA on the left-hand side, and I'm going to put person-centered on the right-hand side circle, and we'll look at what's different and what intersects. And the first thing I'm going to say is in the transactional analysis side, it is a active, directive intervention where the therapist is particularly asking questions, looking, actively directing the client. Person-centered therapy is client-led. It is not active directive. The client leads the way. So there is two differences. What can we put in the middle, Rory? Transactional analysis and person-centered. What is the same or similar across the two models?
Well, I think what's different is TA was developed by Eric Byrne, and person-centered was developed by Carl Rogers. You're going to have to get the theories in there.
Yeah, there's some marks for your assignment.
Yeah, well, I think that the difference is that person-centered works on the edge of awareness. Those things that we know. You know, if you're driving or you're walking along and there's something just on the corner of your eye and you're not quite sure what it is, but you know it's there. And then as you look, you can see what it is. It might be just another person walking along the street, or it could be a shop window, but it's on the edge of our awareness. And that's what person-centered therapists work on, the edge of awareness, something we know that we might need to change, or something we know that is just holding us back. And that's in a conscious mind. We know it's there, like the person walking down the street. They can see it out the corner of their eye, but they can't put a form to it. With a psychodynamic theory, we're in the subconscious process. How we act subconsciously or unconsciously due to the messages we received in childhood. You know, you can't be, you're not good, or you'll never make it, or you're dyslexic, so you'll never be academic. That was one of mine that I carried for a long time, and I didn't realize the impact it had on me. You know, and it was only when I was talking to a TA therapist, he said, that's a really strong message to have in childhood. Do you think that's carried through the arc of your life? And I think, oh yes, it has. And is it useful now? And I'm thinking maybe it's not to see myself as a 5 or 7 year old being told at school. And, you know, sometimes it's about letting those childhood messages go and developing a more adult ego state. In other words, having more agency as an adult and saying, yes, that's what's said in the past, but actually, to be honest, this is how I am now. And TA therapists sometimes refer to it as getting a new script on the road. The idea that, you know, we learn how to be adults by literally learning a script that's taught to us by our parents and the people around us. And that might not be useful as we get to adulthood. So those are two useful ones, subconscious in the TA and edge of awareness and conscious in person-centered therapy.
So we've got lots of differences. We'll look at a similarity in a moment. I did ask about similarities, and we're on differences. But now the thing is, Rory, I've been triggered to another difference now, because I get excited about this stuff. And that is that within TA, it is you teach the model. You'll be teaching the theories to the client. If you're a TA therapist, you'll be telling them about the child ego state. They'll be taught to, you mentioned scripts, Roy, you'll be telling them about what a script is and how to recognize that in their lives. Whereas in person-centered, we do not teach the model. The counselor holds the theories, but the model is not taught. So you wouldn't be explaining about introjected values and what they are and how they work. You would see it and you would work with the client to find their own way, but in purely person-centered therapy. So we've done many differences. What's the same, Rory, between TA and person-centered? And I'll start us off for some points. I'm going to say they're both talking therapies.
Yes, they are. They're both talking therapies. Yeah, that is a really good one. It's not often you see that in an assignment, I have to say.
But it's true.
It's true. It's true. They're both talking therapies. And I think the thing is they're both humanistic. This is really confusing because person-centered therapy is seen as a humanistic mode. But if we separate that idea, the theory is humanistic. In other words, it sees people as having agency and be able to develop their own path just by sitting with someone who accepts them, offers unconditional positive regard, is non-judgmental, and has empathy. If we just take that away and put that to one side, which is part of the modality of person-centered, but in terms of humanistic, it means that all therapists should be using empathy, should be using the relationship as part of the therapeutic cure. I'm using the word cure here. The evidence is really clear that a good therapeutic relationship, no matter what mode you're in, it could be CBT, it could be TA, it could be any of the modes, person-centered, the relationship is a key part of it because people still have to trust you. The client still has to trust, the client still has to feel they're being heard. So that's empathy. And there's a lot of discussion of empathy within the TA community. And in fact, Richard Erskine, a very famous writer, wrote a book called Beyond Empathy.
Yeah.
So, there's a big focus on that. And also, I think the ethics, when we're applying ethics are not modality specific. They stand separately from the modes of therapy that we work in. So those are some differences and some things that are the same, Ken.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm going to leave it with one last word, and it kind of keys into what you've spoken about it based in humanism, and that's relational. Relational in that there is a relationship. There is a relationship between two people which is important. Irrespective of the modality, the relationship is seen as important. And Rory, you can tell us about the research and what the research says about what is the most effective therapy, and it boils down to the relationship is seen as the most important part of the glue, and the modality or the theories that are used within that relationship are secondary. Yes, they're important, of course they're vitally important, but that without there being a relationship where the person going into therapy goes, you know what, I'm going into therapy, I'm there for a specific reason, I'm willing to work, I'm with somebody that I trust is going to get me there, it is unlikely, no matter what the modality, that we can kind of force them into being better. I'm using better or well or whatever the word there.
Yeah, the research you're talking about was done by Lambert a few years ago. It's called Common Factors. We've talked about it on the podcast before, or the dodo bird effect. But Common Factors effectively is a few years ago, I think in the early 2000s, did a big piece of research, and they actually worked out what made therapy effective. And if you think of it as a cake, and we're going to slice the cake up into the effective parts, one is the relationship, the therapeutic relationship and the ability to sustain it. One is the client's motivation for change. One part is the placebo effect, the very fact that someone's going there gives them the impression that something's happening. And then the smallest slice of the cake, or one of the smallest slices of the cake, is actually the modality. I think I saw a pie chart that said it was 15% of the effectiveness. The rest relied on the relationship, the motivation, and to some extent a placebo effect. So I think that all of them are talking therapies, and it's the mechanism of that talking therapy and how that's delivered to the client that makes the difference. It's the therapists themselves and the relationship. But an interesting topic, Ken.
It is, and thank you for setting it for us today, Rory. And I like that this topic is as applicable for a student as it is for a qualified, more mature therapist. We're comparing and contrasting all the time and looking at different theories as a fit and a suitability for our clients and to inform us in our continuing professional development. This has been episode 289 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, we started off with ethical, sustainable practice, 5 reasons to become a clinical supervisor. Ken and myself outlined the benefits of training to become a supervisor and how that develops your professional formation and, to be honest, moves your career along. In Practice Matters, I had not one but 2 guests, Ellie, Finch and Lesley, Simpson-Gray, who talked about using digital tools in the online counselling area, and that's going to be a lecture in our CPD library. And then finally we finished off with a little bit of discussion about comparing and contrasting theories in student services. We know that part of your work as a student is going to be looking at different theories and comparing and contrasting them, and Ken and myself gave you some useful things, I think, for your assignments. And just before we finish, can I ask you a bit of a favour? First of all, if you've enjoyed and benefited from the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps us reach more ears and grow our community. And secondly, if someone you know might benefit from our discussions, why don't you share it on your social media platforms to them, or copy the link in an email so they can hear it too. Word of mouth is so powerful, and we really do appreciate every share, every post and every ear on our podcast. And also, thank you for allowing us to be part of your journey. Always a privilege to help therapists along the way in their work in supporting clients. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
If you're a qualified counsellor or psychotherapist, then why not check out the Counsellor CPD Library? Stay current with your CPD requirements with over 150 hours of academically rigorous, on-demand lectures you can stream to your device. Joining Counsellor CPD will expand your skill set to create a more specialised, highly rewarding practice. For more information on the Counsellor CPD Library, visit counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.